Ava had sat through enough family dinners pretending everything was fine. She knew how to keep her face calm while everything inside her burned. But nothing prepared her for that conference room. She was 33 years old, sitting in a lawyer's office in Charlotte, North Carolina, 3 days after burying her mother. The grief was still fresh. The flowers from the funeral hadn't even wilted yet. And there was her brother, Derek, sitting across that table in a suit he probably bought for the occasion, already talking before the lawyer finished his sentence. By the time it was over, Derek had walked out with the house, the savings, the investments, everything their mother had spent a lifetime building, and Ava sat very still. And she smiled, not because she had lost, but because Derek had just made the biggest mistake of his entire life and he had absolutely no idea. What happened next didn't just change Ava's story, it changed everything. You already know Derek took everything in that room, but do you know what Ava found when she looked closer at that signature? That one detail, that one quiet discovery, is what unraveled everything Derek thought he had locked down forever. Hit subscribe right now, because this story goes places nobody saw coming, and you need to be here for every single part of it. Don't miss what happens next. Trust me on this one. My name is Ava. I'm 33 years old and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. From the outside, my life looks steady. Small house, stable job, quiet routine. But the thing that held me most, the thing that made everything feel grounded, was my mom. She was my person, the one I called when something went wrong, the one who always picked up. We weren't a loud, dramatic family. We were close in a quiet way. Sunday dinners, long phone calls, inside jokes nobody else understood. Losing her was like losing the floor beneath me. But what came after losing her, that was something I never saw coming. Not even close. Derek is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the loud one, the confident one, the one who always had an angle. Mom loved him completely, she loved us both, but Derek had a way of working that love, knew exactly what to say to get what he wanted. As kids, I just thought that was his personality. As adults, I started seeing it differently. He called Mom when he needed something, visited on holidays sometimes. I remembered her birthday when it was convenient. Meanwhile, I was the one checking in weekly, driving her to appointments, sitting with her through the hard days. Derek showed up for the good parts. I showed up for all of it. Mom's health started slipping about 2 years ago. Nothing sudden, just a slow, quiet decline that the doctors kept monitoring and we kept hoping would stabilize. It didn't. I started driving to her place 3 times a week, then 4, then most days. I rearranged my work schedule, skipped trips I had planned, and put entire parts of my own life on hold. I didn't resent it. She was my mom, but I noticed something during that time. Derek, who lived 40 minutes away, suddenly had reasons he couldn't visit. Work was busy. His wife had things going on. There was always something. I kept showing up anyway because someone had to. By the time Mom needed real daily help, I had essentially moved my life into her world. I managed her medications, drove her to every appointment, coordinated with her doctors, handled her insurance paperwork, cooked for her, cleaned for her, sat with her on the hard nights when she was scared and didn't want to say it out loud. I gave up a promotion at work because I couldn't take on more hours. I gave up a relationship that couldn't survive the distance and the distraction. I gave everything I had to make her comfortable and loved and never alone. Derek visited 4 times in 18 months. 4 times, I counted. I remember everyone. About 3 months before Mom passed, something shifted with Derek. He started visiting more. At first, I thought maybe he was finally stepping up, finally feeling the weight of what was happening. I was almost relieved. But the more I watched, the more something felt off. He would arrive when I wasn't there. Stay for long stretches alone with her. When I asked what they talked about, he was always vague. Once I came in and Mom looked tired in a way that went beyond illness, drained, almost confused. Derek was just sitting there across from her looking perfectly calm. I told myself I was imagining things. I really wanted to believe that. Mom passed on a Thursday morning. Quietly, the way she had lived, without drama, without noise. I was there, holding her hand. Derek arrived 20 minutes later. He stood in the doorway of her room for a moment and I watched his face. There was grief there, I believed that. But there was something else too. Something calculating behind his eyes that I caught for just a second before it disappeared. At the funeral, he cried openly, hugged everyone, told stories about her that made people laugh. He was wonderful that day. Charming and warm and exactly the son everyone remembered. I stood beside him and smiled and felt completely alone. The inheritance meeting was scheduled 3 days after the funeral. I walked into that lawyer's office in downtown Charlotte still raw with grief, still running on no sleep, still wearing the same tired feeling that loss leaves in your bones. I brought nothing with me except a pen and a broken heart. Derek arrived 5 minutes late in a pressed suit, calm and composed, and shook the lawyer's hand like they were old friends. I remember thinking, why does he look so relaxed? Why does he look like he already knows how this ends? I found out why about 11 minutes into that meeting. And the answer hit me like something I should have seen coming all along. The lawyer's office was cold. That specific kind of cold that makes everything feel more serious than you're ready for. I sat on one side of the table, Derek on the other. The lawyer, a man named Mr. Holt, arranged his papers carefully without making eye contact with either of us. That should have been my first sign. Lawyers who handle routine estate meetings don't avoid eye contact. They're comfortable, straightforward, and efficient. Mr. Holt was none of those things that morning. He kept clearing his throat, adjusting his glasses, shuffling the same papers twice. Derek sat perfectly still across from me, hands folded, almost patient. Like a man who already knew exactly how the next hour was going to go, Mr. Holt started by saying there had been an update to the estate documentation. He used that word update like it was a software change, something minor and administrative. Then he slid a document across the table. A new will, dated 6 weeks before Mom passed. I stared at the date first. 6 weeks. That was when she was at her weakest, when the medication had been increased, when she sometimes forgot what day it was. Mr. Holt explained that this document had been properly filed and witnessed. Derek didn't say a word. He just sat there with his hands still folded, eyes straight ahead, letting the lawyer do all the talking. That stillness told me everything. Mr. Holt read through the new will slowly. The house, Derek. The savings account, just over $90,000, Derek. The investment portfolio Mom had spent 30 years carefully building, Derek. A few personal items were designated for other family members. And then Mr. Holt reached my name. Ava receives the personal journals and photo albums of the deceased. That was it. Journals and photo albums. While I had spent 2 years of my life caring for her daily, rearranging everything, giving up everything, Derek had walked in with a piece of paper dated 6 weeks ago and taken every single thing she had ever owned. I sat completely still. My hands were cold. My face gave nothing away. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just held out my hand and said, "May I see the document, please?" Mr. Holt glanced at Derek for just half a second before sliding it across to me. That glance, that one small glance told me these two had spoken before today. I took the document and read it carefully, word by word, line by line. Derek shifted slightly in his seat for the first time. Good. The will was formatted correctly on the surface. The language sounded legal. The witnesses were named. But something about it felt constructed rather than written. Too clean, too precise for a document supposedly prepared during Mom's final difficult weeks. I studied her signature at the bottom of that page for a long time. Mom had a very specific way of writing her name, a looping M, a signature that always leaned slightly to the left, a habit she'd had her entire life. I had seen that signature on birthday cards, on letters, on the paperwork I had helped her fill out during her illness. The signature on this document was close, but it wasn't right. The M was too upright. The loop is too controlled. It looked like someone who had practiced it, not someone who had written it 1,000 times without thinking. I said nothing. I set the document down, and I took out my phone and photographed every single page. Derek stood up first when the meeting ended, buttoned his jacket, shook Mr. Holt's hand. Then he turned toward the door and paused. He looked back at me still sitting at that table. I think he expected to see something on my face, hurt, or shock, or the particular devastation of someone who has just lost everything. Instead, he saw me sitting quietly, phone face down on the table, expression completely neutral. Something moved across his face. Not quite guilt, more like uncertainty. Like a man who had planned for one reaction and gotten something he didn't know how to read. He left without saying a word to me. I sat in that room alone for another 10 minutes. Thinking, I drove home in complete silence. No music, no phone calls, just me and the road and the slow, controlled burn of everything I was feeling but refusing to release yet. I got inside, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my contacts. First call, my mom's oldest friend, Margaret, who had been present for almost every major moment of her life. Second call, my cousin Diane, who had been at Mom's side regularly during her illness. Third call, a number I had to look up. The original attorney who had drafted Mom's will 7 years ago. His name was Mr. Ellis. He answered on the third ring. When I told him why I was calling, he went very quiet. That quiet told me I was right to call. Mr. Ellis had been my mother's attorney for over a decade. He remembered her clearly, said she was one of those clients who came in prepared, asked sharp questions, knew exactly what she wanted. He asked me why I was calling. I told him about the meeting, about the new will, about the date on it, about Derek. There was a long pause on his end. Then he said, "Ava, your mother came to me 7 years ago and was very specific about her wishes. What you're describing does not sound like the woman I knew." He asked me to come in, said he needed to pull her original file. I was in his office the next morning. Mr. Ellis pulled the original will from his files and laid it on the desk between us. It was thorough, carefully written, and completely clear. Mom had left the house to me. The savings split evenly between both of us. The investment portfolio, the one Derek had just walked out with entirely left specifically to me because, as the document stated, Ava has been my constant support and I want her future secured. Mr. Ellis read that line out loud. I had to look at the ceiling for a moment to keep myself together. Mom had seen everything she had known. She had put it in writing 7 years ago, and someone had tried to erase it completely. Mr. Ellis recommended an estate litigation attorney named Ms. Voss, said she was the best in Charlotte for exactly this kind of case. I called her that same afternoon. She answered her own phone, which already told me something about her. I gave her the short version. New will, suspicious signature, heavily medicated mother, brother with a history of showing up only when there was something to gain. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "Send me everything you photographed in that meeting room, tonight if possible." I sent it within the hour. She called back before I had even eaten dinner. Her first words were, "I see 3 problems with this document already." Ms. Voss walked me through what she had found. First, the witnesses listed on the new will were not independent. One was a notary with a prior professional connection to the law office Derek had apparently used. Second, the document had been filed with unusual speed, within 48 hours of being signed, which was atypical for a will prepared during an ongoing illness. Third, the language in 2 specific clauses was inconsistent with the rest of the document, like 2 different people had written different sections. She said none of these things alone would void the will. But together, alongside a handwriting analysis and any witness testimony, they built something significant. She said, "Let's start building." After the call with Ms. Voss, I sat quietly and let myself go back to those final weeks with Mom. She had been on a high dose of pain medication. Some mornings she knew exactly where she was. Other mornings she called me by her sister's name. She gets tired easily. Got confused by paperwork. Once I had tried to go over a simple insurance form with her, and she had gotten frustrated and asked me to handle it myself. The idea that someone had sat her down during that period, during her most vulnerable, most confused weeks, and guided her through signing a legal document made my stomach turn completely over. It wasn't just wrong. It was cruel. Her name was Patricia. She had been one of Mom's regular home care nurses during those final months. I hadn't reached out to her. She had actually heard through Margaret, Mom's oldest friend, that I was asking questions. Patricia called me directly. Said she had something she needed to tell someone. She told me that on 3 separate occasions during Mom's final weeks, Derek had arrived at the house during her care hours and asked her to step outside. Said he needed private time with his mother. Patricia had felt uncomfortable each time but hadn't known what to do. She remembered one visit clearly. Derek had arrived with a folder of papers. Mom looked confused and tired. Patricia had never forgotten it. Ms. Voss moved fast. She contacted a certified forensic document examiner, someone who had testified in court cases across North Carolina. We provided the signature from the new will alongside 5 verified samples of Mom's actual signature. Letters she had written, cards she had signed, the insurance paperwork from earlier that year that I had personally watched her sign. The examiner needed 10 days. I went through those 10 days quietly, going to work, coming home, helping Ms. Voss gather additional documentation, not telling Derek anything, not responding to his one casual text that just said, "Hope you're doing okay." I let it sit there unread. The results were coming, and something in my bones already knew what they would say. 10 days after the handwriting analysis was ordered, Ms. Voss called me on a Friday morning. The examiner had submitted his preliminary findings. The results were exactly what we suspected. She didn't want to discuss details over the phone, said we needed to meet in person first thing Monday, but she did say one thing before hanging up. "Ava, we have enough, we're filing Monday." I put my phone down and stood in my kitchen for a long moment just breathing. I hadn't told anyone outside of Mr. Ellis and Ms. Voss what I had been building these past weeks. Not Margaret, not Dan, nobody. Derek had no idea what was already in motion. That was exactly how I wanted it. Ms. Voss filed the formal will contest in probate court on Monday morning. By Wednesday, Derek had received the legal notice by certified mail. I know the exact moment he opened it because he called me 4 minutes later. I let it ring. He called again immediately. Let it ring. Third call, I picked up and said nothing, just wait. He started talking fast, said this was ridiculous, said I was being vindictive, said Mom had made her decision and I needed to respect it. His voice had that particular edge, loud but slightly unsteady, the way people sound when they're performing confidence they don't actually feel. I let him finish. Then I said, "Talk to Ms. Voss." And I hung up. Derek hired an attorney within the week. A man named Mr. Graves, experienced, aggressive, the kind of lawyer people hire when they need someone to fight dirty. Ms. Voss knew of him. When I told her his name, she just nodded slowly and said, "Good." I asked what she meant. She said aggressive attorneys make aggressive mistakes. They push too hard, argue too much, and sometimes in trying to bury the other side, they accidentally surface things better left hidden. She told me to stay calm, stay quiet, and let Derek's side do what they were going to do. The irregularities are already on record, she said. Nothing Mr. Graves argues changes to what that document actually is. The full forensic report arrived on Thursday. Ms. Voss called me into her office and laid it on the desk between us. 11 pages. Detailed, technical, completely precise. The conclusion was on page 9. The signature on the contested will showed significant deviation from verified authentic samples in 7 measurable characteristics including baseline angle, loop formation, pressure pattern, and letter spacing. The examiner's professional opinion, the signature was not consistent with being written by the same individual. He had testified in over 60 cases. His findings had been held up in court every single time. Ms. Voss slid the report toward me. I read that conclusion 3 times. Then I looked up and said, "What happens now?" She smiled. "Now we take it to court." Patricia came into Ms. Voss's office on a Tuesday afternoon. She was nervous. I could see it in the way she held her bag in her lap with both hands. Ms. Voss was warm with her, patient. Let her tell everything in her own order and her own time. Patricia described all 3 visits from Derek in detail. The folders he brought, the way he asked her to step outside each time. The last visit, the one she remembered most clearly, she described Mom as visibly confused, asking the same question twice, struggling to focus. Derek had stayed for 40 minutes that day. Patricia had sat outside the entire time feeling deeply uneasy. When she signed her formal statement, her hands were steady. She knew she was doing the right thing. 2 weeks before the court hearing, Derek's attorney contacted Ms. Voss with a settlement offer. They were proposing to give me 30% of the liquid assets, roughly $27,000, in exchange for dropping the contest completely and signing a document releasing all future claims against the estate. Ms. Voss presented it to me without opinion, the way good attorneys do. Just laid it on the table and waited. I read it once. Thought about Mom signing her name in that looping way she always had. Thought about Patricia sitting outside that door feeling uneasy. Thought about what 30% said about how much Derek actually believed his own document was real. I slid it back across the desk. "No," I said. "We go to court." Ms. Voss contacted Mr. Graves with my response. She kept it short, the way I had asked her to. No lengthy counteroffer, no negotiation, no signal that I was the least bit uncertain. Just one line delivered professionally and clearly. "We will see you in court." Mr. Graves apparently called back within the hour trying to reopen discussion. Ms. Voss declined. Derek texted me that night, a long message I could see was emotional and slightly desperate without even fully reading it. I opened it, read the first 2 lines, and put my phone face down on the counter. I made dinner, helped my neighbor's kid with homework, watched something quiet on TV, slept well. The courtroom was 3 weeks away, and I was completely ready. The probate court hearing started on a Tuesday morning. I wore the same dress I had worn to Mom's funeral. Not for drama, just because it felt right, like I was doing this for her. Ms. Voss sat beside me, composed and completely prepared. Derek sat across the room with Mr. Graves, both of them in expensive suits, both of them projecting a confidence that I had learned by now meant very little. The judge was a woman named Judge Calloway, sharp eyes, no patience for theater. She called the room to order and everything went quiet. I folded my hands on the table in front of me and took one slow breath. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Mr. Graves presented Derek's case first. It sounded polished on the surface, devoted son, mother's clear wishes, properly filed document, everything above board. But Ms. Voss had prepared for every single point. Each time Mr. Graves made a claim, she had documentation that quietly contradicted it. The timeline of the will's filing, the witness connections, the speed of the notarization. Judge Calloway asked sharp questions after each point, the kind of questions that don't have comfortable answers. Derek sat rigid beside his attorney. I watched him from across that room and saw something I recognized. The look of a person whose carefully constructed version of events is developing cracks too fast to patch. When Patricia took the stand, the energy in that room shifted completely. She was calm, clear. She didn't use dramatic language or emotional appeals. She simply told the truth in plain, specific detail. The 3 visits, the folders, being asked to step outside, Mom's confusion during that final visit, the 40 minutes Derek spent alone with her. Judge Calloway listened without expression, but I watched her pen. She wrote more during Patricia's testimony than at any other point in the hearing. Mr. Graves cross-examined Patricia hard, tried to suggest she was misremembering. Patricia looked at him steadily and said, "I have replayed that last visit in my mind many times. I am not misremembering anything." The courtroom went completely still. When the forensic document examiner presented his findings in person, the impact was different from reading it on paper. He was methodical, precise, and completely unshakable. He walked Judge Calloway through each of the 7 measurable deviations in the signature. used enlarged side-by-side comparisons projected on a screen. Explained each characteristic in plain language anyone could follow. The loop formation, the pressure pattern, the baseline angle that shifted in a way inconsistent with natural signing. Mr. Graves tried to challenge his methodology. The examiner responded to every question with the same steady technical certainty. When he stepped down, Judge Calloway removed her glasses and looked at the document for a long, silent moment. That silence felt like a verdict already forming. Judge Calloway didn't take long to deliberate. She returned to the bench the following morning, and the room went silent before she even spoke. She ruled that the handwriting analysis presented sufficient professional basis to question the document's authenticity. Combined with Patricia's testimony regarding Derek's access during a period of documented cognitive vulnerability and the irregularities Ms. Voss had flagged in the document's preparation and filing, the court found the contested will invalid, void, legally unenforceable. The original will drafted by Mr. Ellis 7 years ago was declared the binding document governing the estate. Every asset Derek had walked out of that meeting room was no longer his. I sat very still and let the words land one by one. Judge Calloway did not stop at voiding the will. She noted from the bench that the evidence presented raised serious questions warranting further review. She referred the matter, specifically the forensic findings and Patricia's testimony, to the district attorney's office for potential investigation into fraud and document forgery. Derek's face when she said that was something I will carry with me for a long time. Not exactly. More like a quiet recognition that actions have weight, that you cannot move through people's lives taking what isn't yours and walk away clean. Mr. Graves put his hand on Derek's arm. Derek just sat there, looking at the table, looking like someone who had finally run out of angles. I walked out of that courthouse alone. Ms. Voss had offered to celebrate, dinner, drinks, whatever I wanted. I thanked her and said maybe another day. I just needed to walk. So I walked through downtown Charlotte in the afternoon light, no destination, no plan. I thought about Mom, about her looping signature on birthday cards, about the line in her original will, I want her future secured. She had seen me. She had always seen me. I stopped at a small park and sat on a bench and finally let myself cry. Not from pain, from release, from the feeling of something heavy and unjust being lifted completely. Mom had written the truth 7 years ago. It just took a little longer to make sure everyone else heard it too.